There is a continuous debate around the concept of consciousness marked by harsh disputes among neuroscientists, cognitive naturalists, phenomenologists, advocates of transcendental arguments, philosophers of religion, psychologists of awareness, and quite a number of transdisciplinary researchers, all of them offering their hypotheses to solve or to dismiss as irrelevant what in the year 1995 David Chalmers called the hard problem of consciousness. He was referring to the relationship between physical phenomena such as brain processes and mental states with phenomenal qualities known as qualia. It's not my wish to grapple with the so-called hard problem in this paper, and although my standpoint is cognitive naturalism and I perceive qualia as simulations of subjectivity, this conference is not the ideal milieu for going into deeper cognitive philosophical argumentation. It's not easy either to find eloquence to contradict Chalmers' rhetorical persuasiveness when he addresses his audience emphatically. Let me quote him. Why on earth should all those complicated brain processes feel like anything from the inside? Why aren't we just brilliant robots capable of retaining information, of responding to noises and smells and hot saucepans, but dark inside, lacking an inner life? And how does the brain manage it? In this paper, my intention is less ambitious. I have chosen a particular angle from which I'm going to approach the allegedly soft problem of how we perceive things and how we remember, how we perceive ourselves, and how we get deceived while perceiving. The thing last mentioned, perceptive deception, is relevant, both for the argumentation put forward in this paper and for my elsewhere explained hypothesis about consciousness as transsubjective dynamism of modeling the model of our reality. In order to do the task, I need an unconventional introduction, bridging the gap between the topic of mirroring in perception and self-perception and the problem of imaginative or mental simulations based on shared neural representations. Let me introduce the first example from the artistic domain. There is a famous painting by Gustave Courbet, a self-portrait titled The Desperate Man. This painting was done between 1844 and 1845 towards the end of Romanticism. Instead of offering an analysis of the painting from the perspective of classical aesthetics, and instead of quoting an expert in Courbet, some established art historian like Pierre Courtillon, who published his study on Courbet in 1931, Marie-Thérèse Desforges, who wrote about Courbet's self-portraits in 1977, or Thomas Schlessler, who wrote about reception of Courbet's art in 2007. I opted for a quote from a blog written by an art history major. Let me quote him. In this portrait, you see a man in a frantic state of mind, tearing at his hair with bulging eyes. The viewer sees the emotion behind this painting, the sheer panic of a man lost within in his own thoughts. His brows are in a worried position, as if by looking at the viewer he has seen something that is dooming. It could have been a portrait of a drunken traveller, coming home and seeing his own face in the mirror. A self-portrait of a romantic artist, seeing his reflection in the mirror and wanting others to see him exactly as he was that night, as a bohemian genius. No, this is supposed to be the self-portrait of the desperate man. What he sees, he depicts realistically desperate in his attempt to show to the one that looks at the painting the effects of what he has seen while mirror gazing. On a simple question, what do you see there? Most of the people observing the picture would say that they see a man who seems to be in a particular emotional and psychological state of mind. They would more or less agree on the fact that there is a state of mind behind the face depicted by the artist, a mood or a mental state at a particular time. There is no specific time scale for the painting itself, except that its material aspect bears out in time. We cannot determine the exact number of people who looked at the painting, the number of people who watch it right now in the museum, and the number of people who will observe it in the future. We cannot determine exactly what is the period for the time-scale value of a famous picture. The circumstances of normal human life in normal social circumstances, plus the particular circumstances on the art market that put the value and the price of that particular painting very high, force people to settle on a consensus when answering to the question, what exactly is the state of mind of the man on the picture? The people in the museum answer almost the same thing, though with a certain reluctance. Desperation is a desperation, am I right? The title of the painting makes them a little bit more relaxed about the supposed truth of their answer. Here we come to the problem of qualia. To what extent and by what external and internal forces am I, as an observer, instigated to become aware of a particular quale? This time, the quale of desperation. Is the meaning of the picture in the social consensus between my supposedly individual quale and Courbet's supposedly individual instance of subjective conscious experience frozen in time in the material of oil on canvas? What is the nature of the supposed individuality of a quale? How much constraint, biological and neurological, psychological and social, is built in the socially consensual individual state of mind? Is that thing behind the face really an individual state of mind? Or the painter actually conveyed the stasis of an aesthetic concept of romantic mood? Is he perhaps feeling desperate to fit his qualia into some bigger quale-like modus of romantic mood, some sort of a collective feeling of the times? What makes the artistically simulated subjectivity, let me call it a footprint of an artist's quale, traceable, recognizable, communicable and translatable into our experience, into what Vittorio Gallese calls shared manifold of intersubjectivity, and finds its base in mirror-matching mechanisms shared by the humankind. The hard problem of qualia is that qualia as such do not exist. My hypothesis is that they do not exist except in their social neurological functionality, where every member of a fuzzy set of unsupposed qualia measures its degree of membership against another fuzzy set of supposed qualia. A good writer excels in fuzzy relation equations, and a good reader knows how to read them. A good painter often counts on an optical illusion, and a good watcher enjoys a shared mistaken perception because it seems right being wrong, like all humans. This functionally useful folie à deux is a fantastic mechanism in the reception of art, but it becomes literally fantastic when applied to the reception of life, where the folie becomes a shared measure on a human scale, and where the model of our reality gets maintained and optimized. Generally speaking, it's comforting and evolutionarily useful to share illusions, from optical and oral to mental ones. This is how we humans delineate the reality of our possibilities from the reality of an unexperienceable biodiversity or technodiversity. In the text titled Possibilities of Detecting Qualia in Natural and Artificial Agents from 2017, Roman Jampolsky is looking at implications of being able to detect and generate qualia in artificial intelligence. He describes a reductionist theory for appearance of qualia in agents based on a fully materialistic explanation for subjective states of mind, an attempt at a solution to the hard problem of consciousness. Defining a test for detecting experiences and showing how computers can be made conscious in terms of having qualia is not new. Already in 2007, Aaron Sloman asked why some machines may need qualia and how they can have them. Sloman demanded a new Turing test for robot philosophers. Jampolsky says that differences between what is traditionally considered to be an illusion and a wide range of other less known types of illusions we live by can be explained by how frequently we experience them. For example, the sky looks different depending on the time of day, amount of sun, on the angle you are experiencing it from. but we don't consider it to be an illusion because we experience it so frequently, says Jampolsky. Let me introduce now the second example from the artistic field. Czech author Karel Čapek has become best known for his play RUR, Rossum's Universal Robots, premiered in 1921 in Prague, in which he introduced the word robot for the first time ever in its modern meaning. Rossum, one of the main characters from his science fiction play, is a genius physiologist who succeeds in chemically synthesizing living protoplasm and in constructing complex artificial life forms, including man. Rossum's son, an apt engineer, finds a way to manufacture large numbers of humanoids at lower costs. His robots outperform humans, but strictly speaking, they are not machines. They do not only perform tasks in response to given stimuli, and they are not, let me use Chalmers' words again, dark inside, lacking in life. In RUR, Čapek contrasted creativity, both artistic and scientific, with product-oriented inventiveness exemplified in the engineering logic of invention coupled with market-oriented managerial competences. The story ends with a revolt of the robots who eventually kill their creators. The engineer, the only survivor, concludes poignantly, if there are no more human beings left, at least let there be robots. The dark irony of the last sentence in Čapek's play, composed in the early 20s, sounds surprisingly familiar in the context of the recent cognitive neuroscience robotics, whose advances in synthetic approaches to human understanding are already remarkable, but not devoid of ethical controversy. Let me quote Jampolsky again. Essentially everything can be considered to be an illusion. The difference is that some stimuli are very common while others are completely novel to us, like a piece of great art. This makes us think that if we experience something many times it's real, but if we see something for the first time, it must be an illusion. End of the quote. As a matter of fact, I'm myself an artist when I'm not doing some science and philosophy. The funny thing is that knowing my artistic ways, here I don't want to use the word method, not even practice-based method, I have realized that I cannot trust the standard philosophical concept of qualia. The more I use qualia, the less I trust them. This almost paradoxical claim may sound banal, but the feeling behind it can be best explained by quoting well-known Wittgenstein's statement about working in philosophy. Nothing is so difficult as not deceiving oneself. It is not just about the impossibility of true self-awareness, and it's not just about the difficulty of obtaining conceptual clarity connected to the self-knowledge. It has more to do with an eerie feeling that one should work on the ethics of accepting self-deception. But I did not mention Courbet's self-portrait to speak about qualia. I mentioned it to pave the way to the topic of visual perception during mirror gazing, based on the analysis of the findings of Giovanni Caputo related to the strange face in the mirror illusion. Caputo's experiments, conducted from 2010 to 2014, show that in healthy average observers, gazing at one's own face in the mirror for 5 minutes at a low illumination level produces the apparition of strange faces. The experimental statistics of the strange face in the mirror illusion show that some illusions are standardly effective and typicized only on healthy subjects and less effective and unstandardized in patients diagnosed with some psychological problem. All examined normal observers see distortions of their own faces, which they describe roughly in 5 categories, ranging from monsters, archetypal faces, faces of relatives and deceased, to animals. In one of the experiments, patients with depression were compared to healthy controls with respect to strange face apparitions. Apparitions of strange faces in the mirror were very reduced in depression patients compared to healthy controls. Caputo attributes it to deficits of facial expression and facial recognition of emotions, which are involved in the relationship between the patient or the patient's ego and his face image or the patient's bodily self that is reflected in the mirror. The psychoanalytical Jungian attempt at resolving the mystery about the way illusions function in the healthy control group does not seem convincing enough, at least not scientifically. In the elaboration of this problem, I developed different argumentation. My core hypothesis underlying this particular case study is that there might be a certain type of probabilistically acquired embodied calculus that meditates our sensory perception. That would imply that what we cognitively perceive and what we call our reality is already a model. As shown by Petrov, Vizzoli and Muckley experiment in 2014, we can literally see the model without being aware of it, in such moments when non-stimulus-driven inputs allow early neurons to respond even to stimuli which are inferred but not directly presented to the retina. Contrary to standard theories of cognition that assume that knowledge resides in a semantic memory system where a-model symbols represent knowledge about experience, researchers who advocate grounded cognition theories situate knowledge in the brain's model system of perception, action, and introspection. Perception is understood as, for example, visual and auditory reception, action as movement and proprioception, and introspection as mental states and effects. There are different sub-theories within the group of grounded cognition theories, focusing on mechanisms important for cognition such as situated action, embodiment, and simulation. Artists, for example, poets, do not rely exclusively on conscious imagery, but rather operate from inside, from within the realm of neural representations grounded in the brain's model system of perception. Then I could explain poetry as model system showing the mechanism and efficiency of multisensory integrated process. The poet's perceptual inferences produced in the process of cognitive simulation go beyond perceived stimuli. It seems to me plausible that the mystery of the strange face in the mirror illusion could be explained by Bayesian inference automatically done by our brain. While the person is mirror gazing at the reflection of his face, our brain, which is active all the time, even more so in the supposedly resting modus, is gathering and evaluating information and then integrating external and internal information into a conscious workspace. This is proven by numerous experiments using EEG functional connectivity in order to study the default mode network of our brain. Could it be that during mirror gazing at the reflection of our own faces, our brains play by rearranging at random the information integrated in a conscious workspace? In Frontiers in Human Neuroscience, Joseph Morin and his colleagues wrote that the brain's default mode network is observed most closely during the psychological task of reflecting on one's personalities and characteristics in self-reflection, rather than during self-recognition, thinking of the self-concept, or thinking about self-esteem, for example. I'm backing up my hypothesizing about the functionality of filling in the missing information by Bayesian modeling of sensory reality. A, on some relatively recent experiments on visual processing in the human brain. B, on some new theories of hippocampal memory construction of the world beyond the immediate sensorium. And C, on a range of Bayesian models. Our brains are constantly filling in the missing information for us, and that could explain a range of illusionary phenomena such as phantom noise effect and seeing faces in clouds. Let me conclude with two questions for further research. Could the strange face in the mirror illusion be similar to random screensaver pictures on our computers? Could it be the effect of our imaginatively active, restful brains? I'm prone to think that a peculiar sort of dynamism of reality as a reality model in which we partake is a type of functional complexity that goes beyond both perceptually experiential and cognitively perceptual human scale.